Were there any days where you were saying, okay, I just can't do this anymore?
No, not really. The job changes very quickly over a very short space of time, and I don't think that's possible working at a larger organisation. So you really do get this variety in your job that changes so much every 2 to 3 months.
What motivated you to leave the corporate life?
I wanted to be a bigger part of a smaller machine. I wanted more control over my destiny, and I wanted to do something different. You have to be stubbornly relentless on the vision, but you have to be flexible on the details. You have to know when to be which, because if you're not stubborn on the vision, then it'll be too easy to give up. But you need to know when to change gears quickly and go in a new direction. You need to really love what you do, because this is going to take up a big part of your life.
Today we will dive into the transformative journey of our special guest, a former banker turned urban farmer, Mathew Howe. From trading desks to cultivating green vegetables, he is the man behind GrowBricks, an urban farming company on the rise, now making strides internationally. I met Mathew 15 months ago at the cusp of his entrepreneurial adventure. Today he is here to share his practical roadmap to success. In this chat, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of living a steady job, taking calculated risks, and building something of your own. Tune in for a real talk and valuable insights about making a significant pivot and what it is to be an entrepreneur. Mathew, we met each other a year ago, right?
Yes,
For the
I think
first
so.
time. So what has changed?
GrowBricks has grown. We're now a team of 8 full-time, and our customer base has expanded here in Singapore. And we just launched in Malaysia. So we've got a number of farm installations going up in Malaysia next month. And we've incorporated in Australia, and we're basically talking to people now about going to places like Dubai and India. So it's really about taking the momentum that we've built over the past year and a half in Singapore and starting to do that in new places.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm so happy to see this development, really, because I think what you're doing is one of the future of food, definitely, what everybody should have in their house. Amazing. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I mean, we think that basically everybody should have a closer relationship with the source of their food. And, we see urban farming as something that everybody that lives in cities should have some involvement with to nourish the mind, the body, and the soul. And we're here to make that happen. That's what our movement is all about.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, absolutely agree with you. So let's go back a little bit, because this episode now is going to be about documenting your decision to leave and step by step how you developed your business, because many people who would listen potentially would want to do something like this, leave their corporate life and start their own business. And you're just going to give the blueprint that worked for you. What motivated you to leave the corporate life and dive into the unknown?
Okay, so I suppose a bit of background. I spent 15 years working in banking on a trading floor as a trader in London, and then a salesperson in Singapore. And whilst I enjoyed the experience and I met a lot of interesting people, and it's certainly a lot of fun, that wasn't what I wanted for the second half of my career. I wanted to be a bigger part of a smaller machine. I wanted more control over my destiny. And I wanted to do something different and something that could have more of an impact on people's lives. It's quite difficult when you work in a large organization to actually have an impact.
What was that moment when you were ready to do the step? You know how many people ask me, well, how did you know when is the moment? Can you describe this step by step? How can somebody recognize that the moment is right for them to take the step forward?
For me, it was when the fear of not knowing became greater than the fear of failure. I guess it's about projecting forward 20, 30 years and and then putting yourself in a position where you look back on your life and you don't want to have any regrets. You want to know that you tried everything and you explored yourself. And I don't want to be, an older version of myself and have regrets about not having tried. And that fear of being there and not knowing whether I could have made it was a concern for me. And then you've got to look at the fear of failure, which I think has two components. One, I think the big one is financial. But the first thing you need to know is, even if you are successful, your financial situation is going to change significantly. Very unlikely that you are going to be on the same financial trajectory for the next 3 to 5 years that you are in your current corporate job. So you need to take all that into consideration, and that's all down to personal circumstances. But I also think a big part of fearing failure actually is not so much about that, but it's actually about worrying about what people think about you. I think when you have a successful career in, say, for example, corporate role, you have a fancy business card and a nice big fat paycheck, and you start to shall we say, identify yourself with this role, and you think that, I don't know, I think maybe you think that people will have a respect for you because of this role and this place you play in society, and you're worried about, well, if I go and do this and I fail, what will other people think? What will other people think of me? And I think as you start to get a bit older, you start to care less about what other people think. So that becomes a lot easier. And actually, what I think now is that people don't care as much about what you're doing as you think they do. It's really important to get the support of maybe 1 or 2 people. And one of them is likely to be your partner or your spouse. They have to be 100% behind you. But then really, I don't think anybody else really matters. Nobody else really cares what you're doing. So don't let that be a big part of fearing failure. So in answer to your question, it's basically when the fear of never knowing, of having regret when I'm older, became greater than my fear of failure. I started to care less about what people thought, and I started to care less about, shall we say, how much money I actually needed to be happy going forwards. I think as you get a bit older, you're less interested in buying things and more interested in having and making sure that your time is, you're doing something which is satisfying and fulfilling.
I see. So let me just go a little bit deeper on that. People are always wanting more, more, let's climb that next, and I have a bigger house, and I have a better car, and I have more clothes, and I have this and that. So did you reach that moment when you said, well, no, I don't want these things. I know what enough for me is, and that's what enough for me is. And when you accepted it, that was a threshold.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, at some point I was no longer interested in having a fancier car, or no longer interested in having a larger house, or those things. I knew that, I suppose I started to realize that go forwards 15 years, those things weren't going to make me satisfied or happy anymore.
So how did you de-risk this decision?
Every individual circumstance is different. It really helps, I think, if you're in a family with 2 incomes. That plays a big part in the decision. Obviously, if you have children, that also plays a big part in the decision, because you're taking risks for the whole family. It's not just yourself. And then you need to figure out, what your own personal financial runway is, and then work the calculations backwards. Give yourself 3 to 4 years, and you've just got to do the sums, and then figure out whether you need to adjust your lifestyle if necessary.
So once you left and you started with the new company, what were the first things you did?
Basically, this company was bootstrapped for a very long time. So I started working on this just as a hobby at the end of 2019, and it was just a hobby for an entire year. A lot of the product was developed in my spare bedroom through COVID, using 3D printers, and it was really only a year later that I decided that I made that decision that I spoke about earlier to go full time. So you can do an awful lot, and I really recommend that other people do this too. You know, do as much as you can with your evenings and your spare time. You really want to be confident that, as confident as possible that what you're going to do is will succeed. So I encourage everyone to, put in the hours in the evenings and the weekend to really take things as far forward as you can. But you can only go so far working weekends and evenings. Like, for example, and you could probably go further if you're in the software business, but we brought a physical product to market, and when you do that, you need to engage with suppliers and manufacturers, and if you want to develop those relationships and move things forwards, they're not going to meet with you on a Sunday afternoon or Wednesday at 9 p.m. So you have to, it's at that point that you've then got to make the decision to go in all in 100%. And for me, the first, it was actually very slow to start with, because I had to basically take the product from a prototype to market, which was basically 6 months without a product, designing, working with engineers, meeting them once or twice a week. And until I had that product, it was very hard to really test any of the hypotheses that I had. I mean, sure, you can do some marketing, you can try and sell for, do some pre-sales, but it's the first 6 months were actually, shall we say, quite lonely through COVID, and it was quite difficult, to be honest. It's a big change.
You invested your own money, right?
Yeah, I invested my own money and I raised funding. That's another thing. No one is going to invest in you if you're only committing part-time to a project.
So you invested money, you brought this project to a certain level and extent, and then you said, okay, I would need funds or investors. So when was that moment, and how do you know you get to that?
Oh, so basically the money was needed to take the product from prototype to a manufactured product. So in order to do that, there's quite a large, unlike software, whereby you don't have this constraint. If you want to take a product from prototype to market, you need hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in the manufacturing processes and equipment.
I see. Okay. And how do you make the plan of how much you need?
I knew I had a rough idea what it was going to cost, just from a product perspective, and then basically I raised a bit more just to give me some runway for a year or so, and that was that. And it wasn't particularly easy to raise that money. So if there was more money offered to me, then maybe I would have raised more and sold more of the company. But it just so happened that that's all I could raise at that time, so it had to be enough. Yeah.
And were these angel investors, or how did you go about this?
It was basically just through connections. I'd say angel investors. Yeah, probably more angel investors rather than friends and family. In fact, none of my investors, maybe with the exception of one, I had a previous relationship with.
You got the investments. How did you go about finding your clients and the sales process? Was it yourself only? Did you hire people? Can you just walk us through this period of time, this very important step?
The product was always supposed to be a B2C product for homes. The idea was that it would be this piece of furniture that people could buy and they could put it in their dining room or their kitchen, and grow their own produce. And then we would provide a service that sort of assisted with that, just to make sure that people keep going rather than give up after a few months, which is what I saw was happening quite regularly. So before I had a finished manufactured product, I was opening up my house on a Saturday morning and inviting people over, and I was baking bread and making coffee and making pesto, and just trying to hustle some business from people in the community close to where I lived. And I did this for a while, and then a hotel that was close by was just reopening, and they found out what I was doing. And this particular hotel was going to have a health and wellness angle to it. So they asked if I could come in and give similar talks. So I said, okay, I'll do it, but you're going to have my product in the hotel. I didn't think they would say yes, but they did. and then they said, oh, how much does it cost? And then I basically threw a number at them. I didn't think they would say yes either, but they did. And then we installed there, and then after that, the media launch for that hotel happened, and the local news company, Channel News Asia, were coming to feature the launch of the product. The launch of the hotel, and then they decided that they wanted it in their office too, and then somebody else, and it just kind of spread, and then quite quickly the business pivoted away from being a B2C business to a B2B business. And then it was really just through word of mouth and posts on LinkedIn that things grew. I think we were quite lucky in that this was the very end of 2021, and COVID was just coming to an end, and these companies were looking for interesting ways to get people back to the office after 2 years of work from home. And a lot of companies now have a sustainability agenda, and food security is only becoming a more prominent issue on people's minds. Post-COVID, people want to be healthier physically and mentally. So it just so happened that we had this really interesting offering just by adjusting the product, because it was designed to be modular. And all of a sudden, this opportunity and this market opened up where tech companies and energy companies and newsrooms and property developers all like this idea of having, shall we say, an attractive wall farm in their office, because they're already having things like moss walls and shrub walls and office greenery. That's already a popular thing. So it's really just a tweak on that to make it all edible. To answer your question, we kind of accidentally fell upon our customers. And then once we saw what worked and what wanted, then we just doubled down on that. And I guess, by showing customers, by delighting customers, they then say nice things about you, and word gets around pretty quickly. I suppose, more so now, it's other people posting on LinkedIn about the experiences they have with us, and that's very powerful. It's much more powerful than us posting on LinkedIn.
You said you were lucky, but luck is when you work very hard for something and you meet an opportunity, right? So don't play down what you've done, right? You had a product for which you worked for months and months and months and invested money, etc. And this product was great. It was meeting customer demand. It was solving an issue. And that's why you succeeded. It's not that if you didn't have that and you saw an opportunity, nothing would have happened, right?
Yeah, the opportunity wouldn't have presented itself if I wasn't inviting strangers into my house to eat my pesto on a Saturday morning. That's for sure.
Exactly. That's an interesting start of a sales, not very usual one. You said that it was word of mouth, so brand advertising, ads, etc. That was not crucial for you.
We've only just this month started spending money on advertising. So 18 months after launch, we are now, for the first time, spending money on Google, on Instagram, just to see what it can do.
Very good. No, absolutely. It just, we so much rely on social media and we think without social media, that's not possible. But you started with the old fashioned model of come and see, come to my house, try the product, etc. Right. And then you added social media, your account, growing your account on LinkedIn, for instance. You didn't hire a company to do your marketing strategy, etc., etc. So what I'm saying is that it is possible, right? You can do it organically yourself if you have a great product.
If you have a great product and you're passionate about what you do.
How did you determine how many people you need in a company, who to hire? How was this done?
Well, I mean, people have just been added as we've moved along. Uh, there wasn't. It was just me to start with, and then when I got too busy, I was lucky that I had a friend that was looking for a new opportunity. So he joined me, and then when we needed another person and another person, and I think from that perspective, I've been very lucky to just stumble upon super passionate people which all share, the company vision. I think when you have a strong vision and mission, and you're a mission-based company, and you can articulate that mission well, I think it's easier. It's not easy. It's easier to get dedicated, committed people to follow you. Or maybe that's how it works at other places. But you're kind of, you start with, and you're doing it, everything from sales to taking out the trash. It's only when you sort of start to get to, shall we say, 7 or 8 people that then you start specializing in certain fields. But to begin with, it's just all hands on deck, doing whatever needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And often those jobs aren't fun.
Is the grass greener on the other side? As people say, oh, okay, I'm going to leave the corporate life and now everything will be absolutely great. What's your take on this?
I wouldn't say it's greener. It's different. It's very different. So when you finish school, you and you go into the workplace, everything changes. Okay, so you have to adapt to a new environment. Or all of a sudden, it's not just about a few assignments and some coursework. You have to show up, and you've probably got a boss and you need to report into them, but you need to really understand the whole organization and how it all works if you're going to be successful. And some people are really good at this. I'm just not one of them. But then, and you get paid, of course, which is nice. But when you make this transition to starting your own thing, the difference is about as big, maybe even larger, than going from a student to being an employee. Being an entrepreneur is actually, I think, a lot closer to being a student than it is being an employee, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get paid to begin with. And also, if you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, you don't have to. No one is going to give you a hard time if you don't turn up at your desk at 9 a.m. It's really for you, and you have to drive it all yourself. It's really just about you and your product and your service, and getting that to connect with potential customers. And so it's very different. That's what I'll say. I wouldn't say it's greener or less green. It's different, and it's about as different as going from a student to being an employee. What
are the qualities that helped you get into the entrepreneurship? Can anyone become an entrepreneur?
Firstly, you need to ask yourself why you want to be one. Definitely don't do it for money, because if you're just after the money, then much easier to just stay where you are. That's the wrong reason to do it, for sure. So if you're going to do it, do something that you're passionate about. If you don't like what you're doing, I don't think you can make it work. And then I think the thing which isn't immediately obvious when you start is the importance of sales. So sales is really important when you start a business, and sales can take many forms. So it's not just about selling to customers. You need to sell a future relationship with a supplier. You need to sell a vision to potential employees. You need to sell a future return to investors. And of course, you need to sell your product or your service to customers. If you're not comfortable with selling or articulating what you do or your vision or your mission, then I think it's going to be very difficult. So I guess in answer to your question, if you aren't comfortable with sales, then you need to find someone to join you pretty quickly. Yeah, having a product is one thing, but getting people to pay for it is much harder.
You said that you have been working late evenings and Saturdays and Sundays while this company was a hobby. Let's talk about work life. And honestly, this phrase became so cliche, work life balance. I would rather say it in another way. So how do you make sure that you don't burn out, that you still have you're not tired, you look after yourself well, but also work hard, because working hard is what happens when you want to succeed in anything, right? So how do you do that? How do you find the balance?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think I'm there yet. So, but it is difficult. So the thing is, you need to be passionate about what you do. Otherwise, I think the chances of success are quite low. But then, and this is quite useful because it means that what you're doing is your mind is constantly drawn to it, which is good from some perspectives. It's also quite difficult in others because it's very hard for you to switch off and compartmentalize and, as you say, look after yourself, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And burnout is something which does worry me. So look, I don't have a good answer for you there because I haven't figured it out. But I am working on it. It's little things like putting your phone in a box on a Sunday and not looking at it, making sure that you get that half an hour of exercise every day, making sure that you spend time with your family and your friends, and you just try and switch off. That is a lot harder to do when you are running your own business than it is when you work as an employee. And that's quite hard to explain to someone until they start their own business. I didn't realize. Somebody may have said, I probably would have heard it, that you work harder, but I don't think you realize how much more emotionally and mentally invested you are in what you're doing when it's a company that you start. So that's something that you need to consider, which is why you need to really love what you do, because this is going to take up a big part of your life, and it's not going to be easy. And when things don't go well, if you don't like what you're doing, I don't think you can make it work.
Were there any days where you were saying, okay, I just can't do this anymore?
No, not really.
And you're still working hard and you're enjoying it?
Yeah, well, I think the great thing about starting something and getting it off the ground is that things move quite quickly. So the job that I was doing, every couple of months, when you start to bring on new people, the job changes very quickly over a very short space of time. And I don't think that's possible working at a larger organization. So you really do get this variety in your job that changes so much every 2 to 3 months. My job is completely different to what it was 3 months ago, and it's completely different to what it was 3 months before that. And I think that's one of the really attractive things about working for a smaller company. Not necessarily about starting a company, but you can be like one of the very early joiners to a company, and you'd still get this really very varied experiences that I just don't see how you'd get working at a larger company, even if you're very successful.
Yeah. No 2 days are like, in other words, right?
Yes. Yeah.
No predictability, or very, very low predictability, right? Of what tomorrow could bring. Are there any things that you would have, now that you're 18 months into the business, are there any things that you would have done better or differently?
I think I probably would have started more active marketing earlier, an earlier focus on marketing. I think maybe we left it a bit late. Paid marketing.
Were there things that you absolutely did not anticipate and plan that really kind of surprised you?
I never thought that the business would really be a B2B business. I planned for this to be a B2C business, and it was actually quite sobering to find out that it was a lot harder to sell this product to homes than I originally thought. I made a lot of assumptions and preconceptions that everybody would want to grow vegetables in their home. Well, why not? Why wouldn't you want to grow vegetables in your home? But it turns out that there were lots of reasons why people didn't want to start doing this. So one thing that I didn't factor for, so in Singapore, lots of people live in apartments and they don't have additional rooms. And often the dining room and the kitchen and the living room are all in one place. So to have grow bricks in that place wasn't necessarily what people wanted because it might clash with their decor. It was very lucky, as I said, that this hotel reached out and we could make that pivot away from consumers towards businesses, because I'm not sure where we'd be if we didn't make that pivot, to be honest. I'd probably still be sitting in my spare bedroom as a one-man band. You have to be flexible on the details. So you can't, it's not gonna play out the way that you thought it would. Your initial idea, it's very unlikely that the way you initially thought things would play out ends up being what works. You have to be stubbornly relentless on the vision, but you have to be flexible on the details. You have to know when to be which, because if you're not stubborn on the vision, then it'll be too easy to give up. But you need to know when to change gears quickly and go in a new direction.
This is something that people find difficult. They have this vision and they want to do it, and then a slightest change and they're not happy about it. And every time I interview people similar to you who have left corporate life and started their own businesses, they all say that you start with A, and then in the first year is D, and then in the next year is like Z of something totally different that you never thought about. But this is what happened. This is what the market drove you to change what you're doing, so you can meet whatever need is there. Anything for the end of the podcast? Any thought? Any advice?
If you're going to do this, you have to do something that you're passionate about. If you don't like it, I don't think you can make it work. So don't do this. Don't do this just because you dislike your day job. Don't do this just because you think it's a way to earn money quickly or get rich quickly, because it's not. Do it because you want some satisfaction and meaning, or you want more satisfaction or some meaning, or to do something which is ultimately going to leave you fulfilled, so that when you're older and all there is to do all day was watch Netflix and play golf, you're happy with everything that you've accomplished and you don't have any regrets.
Great. That was a great ending. Thank you, Mathew. And
Thank you.
I'm so happy that things are working so well with you. Fingers crossed for all the expansion you're planning.
Thanks for having me.
This is all for today. Thank you for being with me till the end. And before you go, I have a huge favor to ask. Would you please subscribe or leave a message and send us any comments and recommendations? The more we hear from you, the better this podcast will be. Thank you for now, and see you in the next episode.